guys, I'm Pooja. I'm here because I love Beyonce and I love feminism. So this is Beyonce. We know her as a bunch of different things, an artist, a queen, a goddess even. But with her new album, we can also see her as a feminist. What's really interesting about Beyonce is that she actually initially struggled to recognize herself as a feminist. And so before we look at her as a feminist, I would like to establish a definition for feminism and some criteria. So basically we can define feminism as a movement to end sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression. And so this is a very broad definition, but this offers us a really good context to evaluate feminism and evaluate how we as individuals can incorporate it into our everyday lives. So bell hooks, this wonderful woman who expressed this interpretation, further expanded on it, asserting that to be feminist in any authentic sense of the world is to want, for all people, female and male, liberation from sexist roles, patterns, and dominations. And so let's focus on this idea of liberation. She also, what she's done is describe an umbrella, if you will, of intersectional feminism. And so how we express feminism and define like feminist actions is contingent on the different aspects of our identity, such as race, class, or even whether we're disabled. And so these different identities intersect and affect how we're affected, like how we interact on an everyday basis. But back to Beyonce, and the steps she took towards declaring herself as a feminist. So initially, she was a little wary. She was like, oh, well, I guess I could be a feminist. I like equality, but she wasn't like totally gung-ho on it. So what's really interesting about that is that this is a mentality that a lot of us have dealt with. While people embrace the fundamental nature of feminism, we're strangely unwilling to associate ourselves with the actual label. And so, which is weird, so like, because what is wrong with wanting to end these like sexism, exploitation, and oppression, right? So what we can learn is that there's really nothing to be afraid of with these negative connotations. We shouldn't fear them because these negative connotations are actually put into place by the people in power to delegitimize the movement. And so what's really interesting about Beyonce is that despite her cautious tone, she's been actively practicing feminism and challenging sexist roles for as long as she's been singing. And so while the label helps to define the theory, what's really important is how we actually practice it on an everyday basis. She embodies this notion with songs like in her new album like Flawless, Partition, and Blue, where she takes ownership of the multiple aspects of her humanity, including her sexuality, marriage, and motherhood. At the Super Bowl last year, not only did she give a stunning performance, it was actually with an all women of color band and dancers, and that was like, really awesome of her. And so this is especially important considering that Black women have been historically dehumanized and hypersexualized. So by what Beyonce does is by asserting her agency as an independent woman of color, she's challenging centuries of oppressive stereotypes. And so this leads us to a really interesting response that she's gotten on her album. So many rejected it, claimed that it was overtly sexual, shameless, and arrogant. And so this response really reflects a really problematic approach in mainstream feminism, which often fails to recognize intersectionality. So it's what mainstream feminism is like right now is it's focused on the individual and empowerment of the individual. And so this ideal of empowerment sometimes fails to take into account the expense at which we choose to empower ourselves. So like most of us, Beyonce is not that flawless. She's slipped and participated in a few non-feminist behaviors. One instance can be seen in her new album and one song called Drunken Love, where Jay-Z has a verse, Jay-Z, her husband, has a verse that very romantically describes an abusive relationship between Ike and Tina Turner, an abusive relationship that drove Tina Turner to attempt suicide. And so at this year's Grammys, Beyonce and Jay-Z were like getting down to the verse, like they were having fun, but what they were doing is perpetuating these like traditionally sexist structures and ideals. And so while this misstep doesn't necessarily negate Beyonce as a feminist, we must keep in mind that individual empowerment is not okay at the expense of others. So while Beyonce was exercising her agency as to perform the song and express herself, what she was doing is essentially stepping on the experiences of the people who've actually experienced like abuse by portraying it so casually and so positively. And that's something we need to keep in mind when we're being feminists or any kind of activists. So ultimately what I'm doing by being here tonight is I don't just want to show you pictures of Beyonce, although it's really nice on this big screen. I just want to urge you to be aware of your words and actions. You can say you're a feminist, but what's really important about being any kind of activist is actually expressing these actions through what you do every day. Okay.